Hi, welcome to video 3G. This is the last video for this learning target. We've reached the top of the mountain. In this video, we're going to learn how to find the other endpoint. So if we're given one endpoint of a segment and the midpoint, how do we find the other endpoint? All right, well, we're going to start with a graph. If we have a graph, this isn't too bad at all. So we have a segment whose first endpoint is 5, 0. So I'm going to mark that here. That's 5, 0. And whose midpoint is at 6, 3. X equals 6, y equals 3. It's right there. So that's the midpoint. I'll call it M. Question is, where's the other endpoint? Well, however we got from the first endpoint to the midpoint, that's how we get to the other endpoint. So let me show you what I mean. So if we go to the right one and up 3 here, if that's how we go from the endpoint to the midpoint, then that's how we get to the second endpoint. We're going to go right 1 and up 3. The other endpoint has to be right there. So let me draw the segment that we get. So here's the whole segment. It's going to start here. That's the midpoint. And it's going to go up to there. And if I erase the things that kind of helped me here, maybe we can see it better. Yep. That is the other endpoint. So this whole thing is the segment with that given midpoint. All right, so however we went from the endpoint to midpoint, we just repeat that. Okay, well, let's take a look at another example here. We have the point 6, -4. That's an endpoint, so 6, -4 is about right there. And the midpoint is at 4, 2. X equals 4, y equals 2. So this is the first endpoint. This is the midpoint. And we can tell that the other endpoint is going to be up here somewhere, right? So let's see how we got there. So we went, looks like left 2. We went up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we went left 2, up 6. We're going to do the same thing. We go left 2, then up 6. That brings us to the other endpoint, which is right there. So this is the other one. Okay, so let me get rid of the things I added here. Okay, those aren't going to be so easy to get rid of. And let's draw the segment. So segment starts here and goes down to here. And that worked out pretty well. You can see that these two pieces are congruent. All right, so the other endpoint looks like it's going to be 2 and 8. That's the other endpoint. All right, so given a graph, we can kind of figure this out. If we don't have a graph, this is what we can do. So we have a segment with one endpoint at 1, 3, and the midpoint is at 5, -2. So we got to think, in the x-coordinate, how do we get from 1 to 5? How did x change? Well, the change in x is 4. You can get that by just doing the x-coordinate of the midpoint minus the x-coordinate of the endpoint. So if we just do 5 minus 1, we see that x changed by 4. And let's see how much y changed. If I do -2 minus 3, I get -5. That means y went down by 5. So x went up by 4, and y went down by 5. So we're going to start at the midpoint and do the same thing to get to the other endpoint. So we're going to start at x equals 5, and we're going to add 4 to that x. So we will get 9. And we're going to start at -2 and subtract 5. Okay, so -2 minus 5 is -7. All right, so we think that the other endpoint is 9, -7. So we can check our work. So we're saying the two endpoints are 1, 3, and 9, -7. If I find the midpoint, it should be 5, -2. So 1 plus 9 divided by 2 is the x-coordinate. 3 plus -7 divided by 2 is the y-coordinate. That's 10 divided by 2, which is 5. And negative 4 divided by 2, which is negative 2, it checks out. So the secret is figuring out how we went from one endpoint to the midpoint and just doing that again. All right, one more example like this. So let's look at how much x changed. It started at 1 and it went to negative 4. That means it went down by 5. And we could have figured that out by just doing negative 4 minus 1. The y-coordinate went down by 2. It went from 5 to 3. So the change in y was minus 2. Again, we could have gotten that by just doing 3 minus 5. All right, that's how we went from the endpoint to the midpoint. Now we're going to do the same thing from the midpoint to get to the other endpoint. So we're going to start at negative 4 and let x go down by 5. That would be negative 9. And we're going to start at 3 and let y go down by 2, and that would be 1. That would be the other endpoint. So if I kind of write it here, I don't know if that helps us see it. See, x went down by 5, and then went down by 5 again. Y went down by 2, and then it went down by 2 again to get to the other endpoint. All right, that just takes a little practice, but once you get it, you're done.